Before we end off, let's turn to my colleague Kim Bo-kyung and professor of law at Hongik University Cho Hee-kyung to better forecast and analyze how today's election results could shape Korea's socio-political landscape. Bokyung, I'd like to ask you the first question. What is each party's forecast for today, and what regions seem to be the most contentious at the moment?
Well, yeah, general elections are usually really hard to predict because unlike presidential elections where voters from across the country choose from the same list of candidates, in general elections, parties run different candidates depending on the region. So it is really hard to predict. But still, based on current data, two major parties, the ruling PPP and the main opposition Democratic Party, did come up with some projections. As we know, out of a total of 300 seats at the National Assembly, 254 are constituencies, and the remaining 46 are selected by proportional representation. Regarding the number of constituencies, the People Power Party forecasts safe victories in around 90 districts, while the opposition Democratic Party is expecting to win in 110 districts. Both parties are eyeing more than 50 districts to be highly competitive ones, based on the fact that these are regions where polls show support for the two major parties within 3 to 4 percentage points of each other. The ruling PPP sees 55 districts as swing districts, while the DP predicts a tight race in 50. The most contested battleground is the Greater Seoul region, including Seoul, Gyeonggi Province, and Incheon City. A total of 122 seats are up for grabs, and the DP sees 20 as swing districts, 10 each in Seoul and Gyeonggi Province, while the People Power Party says 26 districts are too close to call, 15 in Seoul and 11 in Gyeonggi Province. Now, the so-called PK region, the Busan, Ulsan, and Gyeongsang-namdo Province, where 40 seats are at stake, is also an area where both of the parties are putting all our efforts to secure the seats. The DP believes 15 seats in the PK region to be a swing seat, while the PPP believes 13 are. When it comes to proportional representation slots, the People Future Party, the ruling party's satellite party, is expected to win 18 seats, and the Minju Union Party, the main opposition satellite party, is expected to win 12 seats. And something worth taking a look at is actually whether the Rebuilding Korea Party, which is a new liberal party established by the former Justice Minister Cho Guk, will be able to win at least 10 seats as it expects.
Right, we'll only have to see because only 6 hours have passed since elections have begun today. But Professor Cho, in the meantime, what is your forecast for today's parliamentary elections? And what do you think this time around? What is the significance for today's elections?
Well, remembering that this is a midterm general election with 3 more years to go in presidential term, not just in Korea, but in other countries as well, midterm elections generally take on this character of passing an assessment, essentially a report card for the incumbent government. And unfortunately, there are a lot of issues, particularly in recent months, that I think have raised people's ire in terms of, making them very unhappy. It began with the the botched investigation into the death of the Marine Corps, whose investigation has been essentially stalled, and the sending of the responsible general as the ambassador to Australia, and there was this the green onion or spring onion debacle. And back in February, I think the ruling party actually had very good chances of being able to win the majority in the National Assembly, but the tide has somewhat turned, and as reporter Bokyung has mentioned, the appearance of the reform or new national nation building party, Cho Guk Party, that has really sort of put wind in the sail of the Minju Party. I think without this new Cho Guk Party, the Democratic Party might not have had great expectations in terms of the outcome, but thanks to that appearance, even the PK region, which is generally very conservative region, is being hotly contested in 15 seats. And so with the contested seats also in the Seoul region, it's more than likely that the Democratic Party will retain the majority. The big question is by how many more seats.
Exactly. As you mentioned, this election seems to be a report card coming in midterm. term. And that's why a lot of people believe that the majority would be taken by the DP. And Bokyung, what does that mean based on how many seats they have? What type of scenarios would we be able to forecast?
Right. The reason why it is important to see how many seats Democratic Party takes at the National Assembly is because of the extent of power they can have depending on the number of seats. As we have seen in Hae-young's report earlier, if the main opposition DP and other liberal parties secure over 150 seats or half the seats in the National Assembly, it would be able to solely pass budget bills and laws. And if it takes more than 180 seats, it can designate fast-track bills. And if it holds more than 200, it can amend constitutions, dismiss legislators, impeach the president, and nullify the president's veto. This is the very reason Han Dong-un, the ruling People Power Party leader, said the liberal opposition parties winning as many as 2/3 of the seats would let the leaders of the opposition, the DP leader Lee Jae-myung and Rebuilding Korea Party's Cho Guk, abuse their power to protect themselves from taking accountability for criminal convictions. And as for President Yoon's veto power, since taking office, President Yoon has vetoed 9 bills passed by the National Assembly over 21 months. The bills that have been vetoed include 2 special prosecution acts which investigate First Lady Kim Gun-hee's alleged stock price manipulation and bribery suspicions on a development project in Daejang-dong, Seongnam, Gyeonggi-do Province. If liberal opposition parties take up 2/3 of the assembly, they will be empowered to nullify presidential veto as they can pass a bill again by reapproving it. And regarding the impeachment of a sitting president, this is actually highly unlikely because it requires constitutional court's decision. But still, these are the reasons why the ruling PPP has been intensifying efforts to appeal to the voters, saying the opposition bloc securing more than 200 seats must be prevented.
Right, but since 1973, there hasn't been a single instance of a political party securing more than 2/3 of the National Assembly. Now, I would like to take a look at another scenario. Let's say the PPP does take the majority. Right. What type of scenarios will we be seeing? And instead of President Yoon becoming a lame duck then, how would his administration be fostering power?
Well, if PPP does manage to overcome all those hurdles and take majority in the National Assembly, I think we can certainly see Han Dong-hoon's status becoming much more important within the party. He will become a most likely candidate for the next presidential election, potentially. That's a political scenario. In terms of legislative agenda, I think the People's Power Party might finally be able to carry out some of the pledges that were made by the president during his campaign, such as getting rid of the Gender Equality Ministry, which they hadn't been able to do because they didn't have the majority to pass the law. There are other things like restoring the prosecution's power, which I think the president is also keen to do. But I also looked at PPP's pledges that they have made for the general election, and there are 10 major pledges that are listed. And a lot of them focus on trying to improve the low birth rate that we are suffering from. So things like giving parents compulsory parental leave, particularly for fathers, so that they actually take paternity leave. Also providing more support for child rearing. There are also lots of promises made for senior citizens, such as providing care and covering it with national health insurance rather than leaving it just to private citizens. And so a lot of people actually end up having to, not being able to afford the care that they need. But the problem with these pledges is that there is no sort of details on how they're going to be funded. And so if they do want to implement these legislatively, they will need to work out the budget. So we can see some movements on those fronts, I think.
Better allocation of the budget seems to be key, and I could tell that we're focusing more on the domestic front rather than on the diplomacy or external affairs. Now, Bokyung, there are some variables that we should keep in mind, though, regardless of the results. Could you walk us through what they are?
Right. Well, I would say there are 2. The first one is voter turnout. As we already know, early voting turnout reached a record 31.28%, and this marks the very first time the early voting turnout for general elections surpassed 30% mark since the country introduced the early voting system in 2014. Naturally, there are high expectations for the final voter turnout to be higher than in the past. Usually, high early voting turnout worked in favor of the Liberals. But we need to note that the last presidential election broke that trend, with the PPP's Ye-eun having beaten DP candidate Lee Jae-myung at that time, despite record early voting turnout. Also, some experts say if voter turnout surpasses 70%, which has never been surpassed before for general elections, it could mean so-called shy conservatives came out to vote as they considered the chance of a favorable outcome for Liberals. So we'll have to see how that goes as well. Now, another variable is how male voters in their 20s and their 60s vote, as they have emerged as pivotal voters. During the presidential election in 2022, they showed strong support for the People Power Party's Yoon Suk-yeol candidate at the time. A recent survey suggests, however, that male voters in their 20s are gradually leaning away from the party, while male voters in their 60s, who traditionally are considered as conservatives, are showing more support for Liberals. So victory could come down to how these voters vote.
Right, we are seeing a difference this time around, but regardless of whether we see a conservative or progressive National Assembly, Professor, what are some key policy or legislation that lawmakers must tackle?
Well, there are some issues that they tried to tackle earlier, but really got nowhere, and those include things like education reform and pension reform, as well as better immigration policy, and also there is really not much being said about the environment. We are already experiencing some very unusual climate this year, and farmers are already concerned that the harvest will not be as what they expect in normal years. And so better plans and policies regarding those issues really need to be looked at urgently by the lawmakers. And you mentioned the diplomatic front, and there are things that the president and also the lawmakers need to do to try to improve, particularly our relations with our biggest trading partner, which is China. And so I think those are issues that I would like the lawmakers to turn their attention to.
They're all critical issues that demand much attention. Now, in the meantime, thank you so much for your analysis and your expert analysis today as well, Bokyung.
Thank you.